Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Krono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be doing another one of our Q&A sessions. I'm actually going to go over a couple of things here really quick, but before we jump into that, if you guys are new here, like I mentioned, I'm Krono. I primarily cover PS2 content. Would much appreciate a subscribe as we work towards that 10K mark, hopefully by the end of this year. Anyway, let's get into this. So with these Q&A videos, we're going to be doing them a bit of a different way. I'm actually going to structure them just a little bit, at least for gathering the questions. Now, I'm considering opening up a channel in the Discord for questions. That way, if you guys are in Discord, you can post your questions there, and I'll be able to respond to them in video format later on. I'll gather them all together. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that for the video itself, but we'll figure that out as we go along. But what I'm gonna do from now on, when it comes to these videos weekly, we're going to post the post is gonna go up on Friday, which is today, and I'm gonna leave it up for a full week. Well, then on Thursday, I'll grab the video itself, we'll record it, and then, again, it'll kind of cycle, right? Well, a video will come out on Friday, the new post will come up with the video itself, and so on and so forth. That way it kind of has like a cycling time frame. So expect these to go up on Fridays every single week. Now, this time around, there aren't a lot of questions, which is fine. I really didn't hype it up this time. I kind of just left it to see how it would run on its own. This has mostly been a testing process to see what realistically people want to go with, but we'll see what works and what doesn't. So let's pop over to the video, or let's pop over to the community page and take a look at the questions that we have here. So a nice little wedding photo to grab everyone's attention, which looks like people did enjoy. We've got about 6 comments. Let's take a look and see what we've got here this time around. So Sakura asks, besides bouncer soaring blades, what's your opinion on the other classes in NGS and their respective weapons? Also liking the chill ambience with these videos. You have a really calming voice. Thank you. I've heard that a lot actually with making YouTube videos, and that's why I try to stick to this voice when I do a lot of other stuff, but it doesn't always work out that way. As far as opinion on the weapons, I can run down every single weapon really quick because we have less questions. That means we have more time to fill for the video itself. So if we're looking through each weapon on the list, and I'll actually even pull down the list for you guys. Let's pull it over here. Looking at the Visiphone, if we want to look through all the weapons. Let's look on swords here. So start off with the melee, or we'll start off with the melee weapons, of course. So sword, solid weapon, kind of like a middle of the road weapon when it comes to Hunter. Something that is used mostly for downs from what I've said, or from what I'm seeing. Caliber streak holding, things like that. Okay, not really the best of what it does, but not really the worst either. Wired lance is a very weird weapon. You have to be really good at positioning to get the most out of wired lance. Like if you just YOLO use it for AoE, it's totally fine. Its held weapon action is really nice, but other than that, unless you're really good at playing into Hunter strengths, which is attacking into PAs to get that extra damage bonus, and then attacking from the right distance to get that sweet spot with wired lance for the extra damage as well, you're not going to find a good time with wired lance. Partisans is another sort of niche Hunter weapon in my opinion. It's probably one of the strongest Hunter weapons that we have, just for general play and general use. Realistically, when you're playing Hunter, if you want to use all 3 weapons, and there's this place for all 3 weapons to use, what you want to do is Partisan for single target in your general bossing situations, wired lance for AoE in most cases, and then sword for single target on targets downed is usually what you're going for, or cleave damage. If, like, say a target's down and you're trying to cleave multiple enemies, that's usually a good weapon to go with in that situation. But Partisan is kind of in that spot where it's probably Hunter's best weapon, but that's mostly, it's still very niche, right? Like it still requires some very specific play. Twin Daggers is in a bit of a weird spot now that Double Saber's been buffed so heavily. It used to be that double sabers were almost completely ignored or only used as like the AoE weapon, even if you could call it that much. And Twin Daggers was like, if the target's downed, you are just wailing on them with Twin Daggers. Now it's kind of weird because realistically, you still sort of do that, but it's kind of a mix with double saber now too. So, but Twin Daggers is an okay-ish place, but it's not in a great spot. It's mostly only used when the target's down and not moving. Basically, it's a great weapon when your target's not fighting back. It's also pretty decent at chase, I suppose, meaning that you can follow your target pretty well or stay on a specific spot pretty well. Double Saber is so much stronger now. It was in a pretty weird spot. Then they buffed Whirlwind, and now it is probably Fighter's best weapon overall. Just for general play, single target, AoE, whatever it happens to be, Double Saber is just kind of there for it. Knuckles is Knuckles used to be Fighter's kind of #1 bossing tool, where you would trade counters with the target or backhand smashes for the most amount of damage you can get, and then whenever the target was down, you would use twin daggers. Now with Double Saber being a thing, Knuckles are a bit more of a niche choice, mostly pushing very heavily into single target. I haven't really seen people push Knuckles unless they primarily like Knuckles. From what I understand, Double Sabers is still a bit more powerful overall, but where Knuckles shines mostly is in its counter damage. Backhand smash and knuckle sway can't really be matched by any other fighter weapon. Katana is a very divisive topic in my chats at the very least. Katana is actually probably what I would call the most balanced melee weapon. Now, balance does not mean most broken or strongest. I mean, it quite literally has an answer to every situation -1. The one thing I would say Katana probably is missing is its down damage, or its damage while the target isn't moving, or basically kind of like its big damage that you would use whenever you were to get a break or a down or something like that on a big target. It could use a bit of a bump with, I believe the PA is called Lotus. Lotus could use a bit more damage since it's in a bit of a weird spot, where right now it's actually more damage to play, was it Braver Bouncer, and to have an offhand Soaring Blade with Fanatic Blade and Encore Jump on a single target downed enemy than it is to use the Katana, even if you're playing Braver as your main. Now that's mostly Encore Jump and Fanatic Blade's fault, not exactly Katana's fault, but you got to keep in mind that Katana's losing out on down damage to Soaring Blades with Encore Jump, and that's even without that extra 10, or that's, that's even including the 10% damage buff that's Katana gets for being a main class weapon, which is not great in my opinion. Now, it's been a while since I looked at it. That was the case, or has been the case since the most recent buffs, but there may have been tech or something that changed that caused that no longer to be a thing. I still personally believe that Katana's down damage is where it's kind of lacking the most. That being said, everywhere else, it is doing fantastic. It's got great PA potential. It's got decent chase potential. You even have gap closers now that are very, very useful. You have, I think the only thing Katana's really missing per se is on-demand vertical tracking. Granted, you do have vertical tracking with your, what's the name of that PA, or the way that skill? I can't remember the name of the skill itself, but you have that one skill that you can use that causes your normal attacks to vertically track very well. But that's really the only thing Katana's missing outside of that, the whole, down damage we talked about. And all of those things can kind of be covered by bow being multi-weapon with them, and you're not losing any damage because you can now augment either melee or range and still get full damage for both weapons. So definitely a solid weapon overall. Probably what I would consider the gold standard of melee weapons at the moment. Almost perfect, but needing a little bit more of a buff. Soaring Blades, I could talk about for a very long time. My thought process on Soaring Blades, so I'm going to be brief. Block sucks, needs to be changed. BAPS is a stupid mechanic that I can't believe still works. And I would much rather them take away some of our damage and make our block consistent, and that would be much better. Soaring Blades is a great weapon when your target doesn't fight back. Other than that, it sucks. Assault Rifle. So Rifle is Rifle's kind of in a bit of a, I don't say a weird place. It's good. Like, Rifle's actually in a really good spot, but like, I feel like the range classes are in a bit of a weird place because they can never be too strong, because technically their damage can't rely fully on counters all the time, because then it defeats the purpose of being further away. They recently did give that that buff of the 50% damage buff to PAs, I believe is what it is, across the board whenever you don't have aggro of a target. So that's pretty nice, but if you're playing well enough, you're playing with pugs, you're geared up enough, you're still going to take aggro, and it's still going to be a bit of an overall problem for you. So that to say, Ranger's not in a bad spot, or sorry, Assault Rifles aren't in a bad spot, but they're not in the best. Great support though, and they do really good damage. So, and in some bosses, you can actually cleave their shots through the bosses. I think it's Solus is one of them. If you set up yourself right, you can cleave shots through the bosses, which allows you to do crazy things like Wise did, which was solo 4-man Solus with a Prim rifle. So crazy things like that end up happening. Launchers probably, okay, so this is gonna be a weird take. Not a weird take, but this might be a hot take for some people, but I solely believe this. Launcher's probably the worst weapon in the game right now. Getting close to Talis for like the worst weapon in the game overall. And the reason why I give it to Launcher is because there's nothing that it does specifically better than any other weapon that it has that you have access to in the same class. Like the assault rifle does single target, does AoE. Really, Launcher is only there for its extra grenade, or if you really just want to play Launcher. Now, it does do something cool with its whole laser situation. If you were to say play Ranger Force, you could laser for like ever. But it's in a weird spot where previously Launcher was like the best single target and Rifle was the best AoE. Now it's just Rifle is the best pretty much everything. So it just puts Launcher into this weird place. Can you do content with launchers? Absolutely. There's been a group of 4-man launchers for Solus. You absolutely can crush content with Launcher. But when you're looking comparatively to the other weapons that are available in the same class, it's probably the worst one. Twin machine guns. Twin machine guns, I have a very weird take about, or a hot take I like to say. I think twin machine guns damage is pretty decent. Damage isn't its biggest issue. Some of its iframes are a bit weird. Some of its follow-up damage is a bit weird. Things get missed a lot. TMGs are deceptively a melee weapon, but sorry, they're a melee ranged weapon, which is very, very awkward. I mean, the buff that all the range weapons got with being further away and not having threat is nice, but that only really applies to PAs. So, and I think twin machine guns damage is balanced in a very weird way. Personally, I believe that you should be putting more into using S-roll arts, where that should be where you spend your PP, and then you should only be using PAs primarily for either generating or detonating your chain trigger, and that's it. The whole situation of having chain trigger up and then having chain trigger boost up and then suddenly having to be super close melee range for your S-roll arts to even work, it just seems silly to me. I don't know why that's a thing. I think honestly it should just be a toggle, or it should just have more range in general. Maybe a medium range for a higher damage. Maybe have that spread AoE damage larger like it did back in base game. But TMGs is kind of weird. Not bad, but just weirdly balanced. I know Helvian's probably rolling right now because I probably missed something that's an issue with TMGs. Oh, also their down damage accumulation is still crap from what I understand. Bows recently got a very massive good buff, but the issue with bow that I have found is that it's still kind of forced almost into melee range for some of its massive amounts of damage. Like other range weapons, it got the 15% PA damage bonus buff, but it only applies to PAs. It doesn't apply to everything. And there's a lot of bow damage outside of PAs as well. So it's better, not bad. It does support Katana in a very good way. Actually, funny enough, if you're playing bow as your primary weapon, it's actually worth to offhand a Katana or to multi-weapon a Katana and keep one with you, because in the off chance that you actually take threat, it's better for you to then just use the Katana because the target's going to be close range. And since the buff only applies to ranged weapons, you can then just use the better melee weapon while you have threat. And if you lose threat and you can move away from the target safely, you can swap back to a bow for range to continue, pelting the enemy down with damage. I think you actually have more overall damage with Katana. But if you're someone who likes to run bow, then hey, you have options, right? Gunblades. Ooh, Gunblade. Gunblade is probably one of, if not the strongest weapon in the entire game right now. For some reason this page won't load, but we'll just let it up. It's gonna take, there we go. It's got insane damage potential. It's got insane PP regeneration potential. I think mostly it's its class, right? It's Slayer. But it's overall as a weapon, there's not really much to complain about when it comes to Gunblade. It's just, it right now feels like Sega's favorite weapon. It feels like it's dethroned Katanas and Sega's favorite weapon. I did say that Katana felt like the gold standard when it came to melee weapons. As far as balance goes, if you don't care about balance, throw balance up at the wayside and you just want damage, you want a lot of things that do really, really well for a melee weapon, then Gunblades is pretty much it. It just is, it's not, is it the gold standard? I wouldn't call it the gold standard because I don't think it's the most balanced amongst all the weapons. But if you want what I would call the best melee weapon in the game, it's Gunblade. Rods. Rods are whew, rods are a bit weird. Force is a bit weird. Techs are basically the biggest issue when it comes to rods, not really rods themselves. Techs are very weirdly balanced because of what they decided to do with all of the blot mechanics and all that stuff, where there are different situations where certain status effects affect how the enemy works and like the combat the enemy does. Elemental downs, basically, even though that force isn't the best at doing this, it still overall affects how the techs work, meaning it affects force's overall damage. Force is suffering basically from damage situation. People say that, you know, force kind of sucks or force is trash, and that's mostly 99.9% of the time it's because of overall damage. The techs don't feel great to use, and they don't feel great to use because of damage. You end up having to use some of the same techs over and over again, even in situations where they aren't the optimal choice when it comes to elemental weaknesses. Talis is another divisive weapon that's come up a couple of times. This is pretty much the king in AoE, in my opinion, when it comes to just standard, not set and forget, but like just standard AoE overall. Talis absolutely shines here. It's not a great single target weapon. Now, can you use it in single target? Much like launchers, absolutely. This is actually what I would put the second worst weapon in the game at the moment. It would be a toss-up between Talis and rods. I don't really blame rods as a weapon because it's not really rod's fault. It's mostly the tech's fault. But Talis doesn't have to interact with the techs overall. It has its own bolt mechanic, and since that mechanic has been updated and changed, it's become better. So it's kind of one of those tosses you have to work with overall. All right, had to cut for a second since things started making a lot of noise, but I forgot where I was at with Talis. TLDR is that it's a weapon that's not really designed for single target, but does do single target decently, and has its own bullet system that I think works pretty well nowadays. Sizable buff, but still a bit of a weird place as far as my opinion overall. Not a bad weapon. Not calling out Talis mains, but if you're completing content with Talis, like you're actually overall doing difficult content with Talis primary as your weapon, it is not the weapon that's doing it. Is you. You take that win personally. Don't give it to Talis. Wand I feel is in a much better place nowadays. Wand, I mean, Tector as a class overall is in a pretty good spot. It's pretty powerful. And Wand is no slouch when it comes to dealing damage. Tector isn't stronger than other classes, as it shouldn't be, as it offers some pretty insane support, much like Assault Rifle on Ranger, but it also doesn't offer the most offensive support. It offers offensive and defensive support, while also being able to heal those around you like Force can, and provide you extra PP with, I think it's like overemphasis is what it's called, with that full heal going along with it as well. So it's got a lot going for it. Wand, I feel like because of that, is in a pretty sizable spot and does a pretty decent amount of damage. But if you're soloing content as Tector, again, that's you, not the weapon. It's not really designed to solo content. In group play, it's fantastic. In solo play, it's left a little bit to be desired. Jet boots. Can I say about jet boots, man? That hasn't been said before. Jet boots is in a decent place, but not great. It doesn't really do anything interesting. Where Wand is actually, where Tector Wand is actually one of the best at applying elemental downs. Soaring Blade does massive amounts of damage while a target is already downed. What Jet Boot does well is just keep up the onslaught, I guess, of attacks. Its counters, it actually has access to BAPs with our weapon action with the step counter situation. Does not mean that's a good thing. It means it has the damage, but it does mean that it also has to deal with Soaring Blade BAPs, which is not a fun time. I would say what Jet Boots feels like it's good at is just kind of helping with that elemental down. You're not really needed for it, but you do help get it quicker. So in some optimized situations, it might be the difference between getting the elemental down at the right time versus not having enough. But that's really about it. I wish I had more to say, but there's not a whole lot there. Harmonizer. Waker's in a good spot. Waker's a very powerful class. The only thing I could see that is an issue when it comes to Harmonizer is what feels like there's a few bugs, realistically. I have seen Marmello veer off in different directions more times than I can count between watching my wife Skulls play versus watching my good buddy Uber play. It's just absolutely ridiculous how often you see Marmello just yeet off into the distance. Other than that, though, I think the weapon's pretty solid. Probably one of the better classes in the entire game right now. I'd put it up in the echelons of Gunblade with Slayer. And I think I just took almost 20 minutes to talk just about weapons in this game. So yeah, I think this video is gonna be mostly about the weapons. Let's pop back over to the rest of the questions. Man, that was the first question too. All right, so next question, Nova. Why are you so pro, even more pro with the power of waifu by your side? I am lucky that she has decided to marry me. I count my blessings every single day that she deals with my BS. So yeah, that does feel very pro. What are my favorite movies? My favorite movie of all time is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I'm a fan of the Star Wars movies, fan of the Marvel movies. Those are pretty fun. Just like the overall story altogether. It's funny, I was just talking with Skulls about this, that the Star Wars movie specifically, how the prequels used to, at least when I first started watching the Star Wars movies, my time was during the prequels. The prequels used to get, dumped on over and over and over again, saying how how 4 through 6 was the best iteration of Star Wars. Now the prequels were so trash, and then the sequels came out, and then people realized the prequels weren't that bad. That's what we learned, is that people realized the prequels weren't that bad, and now, God, was it the third movie is probably one of the fan favorites nowadays when it comes to the Star Wars movies. A lot of in between stuff that's really good too, but yeah, I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan when it comes to movies. So back in game, knew it was a good day. Do you plan to play Naraka Blade Point? If I were to play any BR heavily, it would either be the My Hero BR or Naraka Blade Point. Maybe one day I'll touch Naraka Blade Point. I don't know for sure, but we'll have to see. What's a good career or job field to consider getting into? Tech, just in general. If you can get into any job right now, that will allow you to take classes for your certifications in different types of, in different fields in tech, I would highly recommend going for that job. Even if you don't stay at that job, let them pay for your certifications and then move on to the next thing, because realistically speaking, a lot of the certifications go a very long way. We don't need to go into spending as much money for a full-on, college education. You can get a lot done in that short period of time. Tech's a good field. And it branches into everything, and it's almost always necessary. It's just ever changing, meaning you have to keep up with it. It's kind of difficult to keep up with from time to time. So if it's something that you're interested in, I'd say definitely go for it. Tell them to bring back bass. So this is a very common thing that everyone hears and everyone talks about. Base game is finished. Part of what made base game so good in PSO2 was that it had an ending. The ending could be so grandiose, or they could go the route that they did because it was over. Now, the argument's been made that, oh, well, that could be the end of an arc. We can move into another arc in the game itself. As much as I loved base PSO2, really, I loved like 3 different quest types, and it was all in episode 6 for the most part. I would say 4. There was one that was in episode 5, which was Endless, Divide quests, what was it? The Extreme quests, or like XQ, and what was the last one? I think just the overall setting of space quests, like AIS quests, those were about it. Everything else was pretty Resident Sleeper. Story was good. It was fantastic. It got really good in episode 6 when we finally learned what the overall bad guy was. Yes, it took to episode 6 to get the real bad guy behind all of this. But it was good. No, bring back base is not what needs to happen. What they need to do is make base sustainable. So adding something like the mission pass back to base game to make it so people can actually go through and gear up properly and back in base game, be able to acquire mission badges and things like that. Adding in the seasonal rotations of events, other than just the lobbies, adding in back the seasonal events and things like that. There should definitely exist and get players to want to go back into base and play a little bit. It's not a bad thing to have an incentive to go back into base and play a bit, because the premium counts for both games. So even if you get players just to be premium in base game, it's already a win because it counts for both of them. And if players are premium in NGS, they can go into base game and also have premium available to them as well, which is pretty awesome. That, and there's still some things that are only available in base, not to mention all of the star gems that you can acquire. And I think that about does it. Well, thank you guys for joining me on this very weird episode of Questions with Krono. Like I mentioned, this video will be uploaded very soon. With that will be the next community post that will go ahead and allow you to ask your questions. I'm going to see if I can figure out the whole situation with the Discord thing. So if you guys are interested in the whole Discord thing, make sure you join the Discord. There should be a link in the video description to join the Discord. You can always get a link from it from my Twitter or from our Twitch channel, which we should be live fairly soon after this video goes live. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I will see all wonderful individuals later. Take care, everyone. Peace out.